That's good.
And Chris is here.
That's Jeff.
Sitting in his chair.
I'll go try to join in the conference room.
Oh, okay.
Brilliant. Hi there, everybody. I'm just going to sort the slides out. Okay, cool. So I just wanted to let everybody know the purpose of this Hangout is to introduce a new working group, JATS for Reuse. We'll have three short presentations. First, it's myself, then Jeff Beck of NCBI will be talking about JATS 4R and repositories, and then Daniel Meacham will be talking about data mining of XML and the need for standardization. And then after that, we'll open it up for Q&A sessions. During these three presentations, it's closed, but we'll open it up so other people can talk afterwards. And it is also recorded, and it will be available on the eLife YouTube channel, and we'll post it somewhere else. So, just to introduce you to the working group, I've put everybody's snaps up of who's involved. I won't go through everybody, but so our mission is to increase the reusability of the online literature by standardizing the use of the journal article tag suite for XML tagging. So just as a brief intro as to what JATS is, just in case any of you don't know, it's an ISO standard, and it's documents and tools hosted by NLM, and it defines a set of XML elements and attributes for tagging journal articles. There are three article models. The authoring model, which is the most prescriptive, and you're less able to have any variation within that. The publishing model, which is the intermediate one, and then the archive being an interchange model, which is the most flexible. And I know we at eLife are definitely using that model, and a lot of publishers will, because it's the one that we can jam as much as possible into. But obviously that does come with problems, which we're going to go into after this. So why JATS for reuse? Because of the amount of variation that is allowed, there's inconsistent XML, and it's a barrier to reuse of open access content. And Daniel Meacham presented a paper at JATS model, which is the intermediate one, and then the archive being an interchange model, which is the most. Okay, sorry, we had a bit of feedback there. So he presented a paper earlier this year at JATSCon in DC, talking about that, and with a plea to all of us publishers that are using NLM or JATS DTDs to be more standard in our use. And Jeff Beck, who will also be talking a bit later, during the open session also added to this plea. And in response to that, a set of open access publishers and interested parties responded, and we formed this group. So in June 2014, earlier this year, we had a kick-off meeting where we had representation from the list of open access publishers listed there. Also, the meeting coincided nicely with another meeting that had representatives, so we were able to get them in the room with us. They were in the US. So we had Debbie Lepere from Mulberry Technologies, and that's the company that actually wrote the DTD and kind of hosts, well, manages the information online at the NCBI. So it was really great having someone from there. Then we had also Daniel Meacham, who's a data miner. He's from the Berlin Natural History Museum. I'm not going to try and say it in German. I failed miserably earlier. And we had Jeff Beck from NCBI. And so after that setup meeting, where we made great progress as to what we were planning to do, we then had monthly phone calls, and then we changed to bi-weekly calls just to get things going further. So we have a workflow that we devised at the original meeting, where we create a prioritized target list of pieces of content that need to be focused on. We load samples to GitHub, agree best practice and recommendations, and create a best practice sample. The idea is then to have schematron tools that can be built so that people can validate their XML against our recommendations, and to also write documentation so it's easier for people to understand exactly why we're making recommendations and what to do, and to publish those recommendations. And then ultimately we'd like to publish compliance statistics as to how people are getting on with conforming to JATS 4R. So we've made brilliant progress in a short amount of time. We started with the license statement, permissions, and the reason we did that was because, as Daniel pointed out to us, unless it's really crystal clear whether something's open access and free to reuse, he has to ignore it. So for those of us who are publishing under CC BY, it's really important that he doesn't ignore our content. But likewise, for other publishers that might have more restrictive licenses or things, they also, it would be useful if everybody was using the same standard, because then it would be much easier to know exactly what could be done with the content. We loaded a whole bunch of samples onto GitHub. You probably can't read this, but I'll share the slides later. So we've got a repo on GitHub, so there's all the samples there. We agreed best practices and recommendations, so we use issues on GitHub to record our discussions and to make suggestions, and it's completely open, so we really do recommend other people do join in. Jeff has built schematron tools, and they are also available on our GitHub repository. Our aim is to make them available to people via the internet, as in, so a bit like the PubMed tools and PMC tools, where you throw a file at it and it gives you the result. But at the moment, the tools are there, but you have to be quite technical to be able to use them and download them. We've also got the written documentation, and we've published our recommendations, and we're now looking at our next phase, which is math. Obviously, we haven't published any compliance stats yet, because no one's really aware of what we're doing and actually kind of put it into place. So my final slide is just how to get involved with us. We have a Google group mailing list that people are welcome to join, where we do discuss things.
Okay.
Our repo, contribute to our GitHub issues if possible, and we really do want people's input into them. We have a website which is there, and we also publish our meeting notes and progress. They're all on a Google Drive, and people are welcome to join in there. Okay, so that's the end of my slides about 4R. So it's now time for Jeff to take over. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it over.
I will share my screen. Share this. Can you hear me? You are screen sharing.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, let me see. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to talk about JATS 4R and repositories. Essentially, using repository to mean anybody that's collecting information. So it's archives and secondary publishers. And that ingest and distribute whatever way the content. And distribution could be immediate, it could be behind a paywall, could be after some time, or could be a dark archive, because that's essentially built for distribution also. So we're talking about anybody who's going to collect content and for distribution. So repositories are interested in reuse because they are essentially reusers, really the first layer of reuse. And the main reason that, and I'll say we, because I work at PubMed Central, the main reason that we are interested in getting content tagged in a similar manner is that because if it's tagged in a similar manner, it will be easier for us to get it all into the same repository and to do work on it. But there's really other reuse, and I think this is really what Daniel's going to be talking about. And that's the people or organizations who get the content from the repositories and want to do something with it. Daniel's paper at JATSCon this year laid out a lot of areas where the content that we have in PMC, which was normalized enough for us to build the repository, isn't tagged normal enough for him to do something with it. And this reuse really could be data mining or derivative works. And I say repository here, I say that the secondary reusers are going to the repository because that really makes the text mining easier. But if articles spread throughout the internet were tagged consistent enough, I'm sure Daniel and his bot could find them and take the pieces out that he needed, or at least read the places in them that he could find out if he could take something out that he needed. So here's a bit of a personal opinion, and this is what repositories' role is in defining tagging. Repositories need to ensure that what you're getting and ingesting and saving is complete and accurate. But it's really not the role of the repository to tell the publisher what to publish or how to publish. It's the publisher's job to decide what gets published. And this gets us to really, I think, where we are now putting together this group. So we really have three groups of people. We've got publishers who are responsible for creating and managing the content, and they have primary users. They're the readers that they've created their works to satisfy. Then we have repositories, which collect content from many publishers. So they're essentially our first level reuser. Then we have secondary reusers who get the content from the repositories. So a lot of people think, well, if we can get the content tagged better in the repository, everything will be great. But this really is not the place to be defining best tagging practices because it's in the middle of the data flow. And this means that, and if this was the place where everything is going to be normalized, then your secondary reusers are only ever going to be able to get it from these normalized repositories. If the content creators can agree on tagging best practices, then the benefits can be realized throughout the lifespan of the content. So that's the repository point of view, and one reason why I'm really excited about this project and really appreciate everybody working so hard on it. That's the end of my slides, so I will go back to here, and I guess I'll hand it off to Daniel. If I can.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. I'll go to screen share mode now. Okay, I should be screen sharing now. First thing to do my slides, I'll just reuse the ones from JATSCon. So I just Googled JATSCon and like hit number 5 or so are my slides, simply because they're on Wikipedia. And what I wanted to mention is basically 2 things. First, I'm running a bot. It's called the Open Access Media Importer bot that actually goes to PubMed Central, looks at the JATS it finds there, and the first thing it does, it basically looks for the XML, for the license tag, because we want to import audio and video files from open access articles into Wikimedia Commons, and Wikimedia Commons only accepts openly licensed articles or materials. And so we first have to find out whether the article that we have at PMC is actually licensed in a way that is compatible with this kind of reuse. Okay, and if we then go to the articles, then we have a number of ways in which the licensing is expressed. So here is kind of a sample of how this could be tagged. And the problem is there are several elements that often go wrong. So for instance, very few publishers so far have had any URI in the license link here. Many had a link in here, and often it contradicted the one that they had here. Also, if they had a link in this part, then it often contradicted the text, like the human readable version of the license, and all of this makes reuse difficult. And yeah, we have a number of more examples here. They're all linked from the licensing slide, so I'll not go into detail right now. Maybe we can do this later in the Q&A. And so the purpose of the JATS for R group was then to kind of come up with some recommendations as to what the best way would be to tag those things. And if different people have different opinions on what the best way is, then we exchange the arguments for those opinions and try to come up with either certain use cases or really one recommendation. And so we set up this project page that was already mentioned, basically. And there we now have tagging recommendations, one of which is concerned with permissions and licenses. And then we provide a little bit of context, an explanation. And then here, down there, you have a piece of XML that actually kind of fits with the recommendations or what we think is good, useful for people to do. So I'll basically go through this example here a little bit. So this is copied from the JATS documentation. And so it starts with this copyright statement line, which is meant for display. So it doesn't really matter for mining, but we kept it in this example because it basically is inspired by the example that is already in the JATS documentation. Then comes the copyright year and the copyright holder tags, which kind of repeat the same information, but now intended for machines, and that's why in separate fashion. The next thing is the license tag, which actually comes with an X link that points to a URI that is unambiguous and can be kind of recognized by a machine as belonging to a certain license. And then this license P element is what we think is for human consumption. So the publisher or whoever produces this XML, they can put in basically anything, although it should not contradict the license that is mentioned in the license line here. And it's basically up to them as to whether this is an active HTTP link or not, or whether they wrap around some words that make it easier for humans to understand what that link means. So the machine, the miner, would always ignore this human readable part and assume that if there is anything stated in there, it's compatible with what is stated here. And so we've come up with those recommendations. We're also considering edge cases. So for instance, if different components of a work have different licenses, then there must be a way to express that, but that's not always as straightforward. There's also possibilities that licenses may kick in at certain points in time. We have not considered that. So the idea is to build all this kind of step by step, identifying kind of the most pressing issues or the ones that are most easy to resolve, and then moving forward. Coming back to our bot, the first thing it looks at is actually the licensing, so that it can decide as to whether an article is actually worth being mined for our purposes. And what we then mine it for are tags like supplementary materials. And in the supplementary materials, we're looking for media types that are actually audio or video. And there we noticed a number of problems. So many video files are actually not properly labeled as such. So we have an example where a doc file, well, a video file is actually named .doc, and numerous other such examples. And these concern the media type that we just find in the supplementary material. Until that point, we haven't looked at any other tags. Then we started looking, again, because our bot needs more information in order to actually upload the videos. So we go to the keywords tag. And there's different ways in which you can indicate kind of keywords. So there's a keyword tag and subject tag and so on. And we noticed that these are also used inconsistently. Also, when we upload the files to Wikimedia Commons, we need to provide the source, and so we want to kind of format the reference in the right way. And there, again, we noticed that there's problems in that the JATS is either not used consistently or it has inconsistencies in itself. And from that on, we basically started looking at a larger number of tags, and we noticed problems with almost everything that we looked at. And so I'm really excited that now we have a group of people who are actually on the producing end of this who want to fix that. And in order to give you an idea where all this information from the PMC JATS ends up, I'll just go to the page of the bot on Wikimedia Commons. This is one of the last videos it has uploaded, like a day ago or two. And so I go to the file page. First, the file name for this is constructed on the basis of the title of the paper and the DOI. Then we have a description that is taken basically from the caption of the file. In the XML, we have a date, which is taken from the respective date tags and so on. Then we have a license tag. So here, this Creative Commons Attribution 4.0. And then at the very bottom, we have certain categories. That's what we use the keyword tags for. And basically all of these elements regularly fail because the source XML is not clean enough or contradicts itself. And so this means that on Wikimedia Commons, someone, this is volunteers, has to come in and correct the materials. And sometimes that's not even possible. So for instance, there's a number of publishers who do not regularly publish like descriptions with the files that they publish. So there's just a file called something.mov, which is a movie, and there's no description whatsoever. So there's loads of reusability issues of this kind, and in the group we're trying to tackle all of these one by one, and everyone would be welcome to join in. So I'll now switch back from screen sharing. Okay, maybe we should open the Q&A session or something. Melissa, we can't hear you.
Oh. Okay, yeah, so I've been instructed to, if you click on the left hand, the Q&A section, we can see any questions that are being asked. How do we make everyone unmute?
They have to unmute themselves.
Okay, and if you unmute yourselves, then we can hear you. There was one question: define complete, subjective, and accurate. To what end? I'm not quite sure when that came in and which bit that was referring to.
Oh, I think that was probably referring to my bit.
Okay.
Complete and accurate as a representation of what the publisher has published. In PMC, we don't analyze the articles to find out if the science is correct. We certainly don't do that, but we do try to make sure that the XML that's been sent to us represents the article as it's been published accurately. So that's complete and accurate from the point of view of ingesting articles into a repository.
Thanks, Jeff. And there's another question from Carl Ward at the end. If there is possibility of contradiction, why have a human readable summary of the license embedded in the XML? Why not leave a human reader to follow the license URL? Okay, so I remember this discussion. I don't know whether either of you two want to take this, or, I mean, we talked about it a lot, didn't we? And it was around publishers' need to have something in kind of like the printed version of the article for a human reader. And often people do want to have their own text around it, not just have a URL link.
Yeah. Even now that Creative Commons licenses have been around for a decade, not everyone reading scientific articles is familiar with them. So if you just put in a URI to a license, this doesn't necessarily mean that the readers of the article understand what that means and what it entails. And that's why it is common practice to wrap a number of human-readable words around that basically express the gist of what the license says in a way that is even shorter than the short version that you get from Creative Commons once you click on the link. So that's what I think about it. And from the perspective of data mining, this is kind of superfluous if the information is provided via that link in the license tag, but often it is not. Like many publishers do not provide any URI, and then we kind of switch into data mining mode. So we kind of try to map human-readable text onto URIs for real licenses. But of course, this is shaky ground. We might be making mistakes in mapping one way or another, in interpreting open stuff as closed or closed stuff as open. And so the best way to go about signaling the licensing is really using a URI and doing it in the place where the bot would look for it, and that is in the license tag rather than the license P one.
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I would like to just add on to that, if I might. And that is, I'm not sure if people can hear me.
Yes.
You can, though, right? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, and that one of the outstanding issues is how documents might be able to identify themselves as conforming to the JATS for R recommendations. And the question brings up what to do if the license URI and the human readable description of the license contradict one another. And right now, I believe Daniel's bot is very conservative, and if there's such a contradiction, it just you know, it throws it away. It says it assumes that the license is not well defined, and so he won't reuse it. But if we establish a clear and unambiguous way for documents to identify themselves as conforming to JATS for R recommendations, then we could specify that the license URI takes precedence. So then, if there were a contradiction, something could rely on the license URI as being canonical license.
I agree.
There are a couple of other questions. I don't know, Daniel, whether you can see them. So the one that I can see right now from Dartmouth Journals about there being any response from the major online hosts. and their acceptance. I can take that one. We haven't actually invited them to the groups or gone out that far yet. What we wanted to do was to form the group to begin with, get an idea of how we were getting along, tackle the first issue, and then this is our first kind of broadcast live and kind of getting ourselves out there. That is also, we wanted much more buy-in from a lot of publishers. So, and then the online host would be part of that as well. But really, we think it's more important. Well, I think it's more important to get the publishers involved, and then they can push the online hosts as well. I mean, I know that, for instance, Highwire Express, we have told them about ourselves because we use them, but we haven't actually actively invited anyone like that to the group yet. I have another comment here from someone.
Although we haven't tried to implement any of these recommendations directly with our own hosting provider, we have the experience of the last year of working with them on modifications to our XML tagging, and we found that although it's a little bit of work, it's not impossible, and with the constructive approach, these kinds of modifications are generally extremely possible. That's it. Yeah.
So that does, okay, so are the others answered? Daniel, we've
We have a
got,
new comment from Dave Boston about offer one from end license options.
yeah, who wants to take that? Not me.
I think we're converging on the recommendation that, at least for open access, that one of the CC licenses be used. Does that answer the question?
I think there might be a slight delay for people typing in things, because there's also another comment from Dave about XML has valid, not complete.
Yeah, that's probably referring to one of my comments. I wasn't saying that we want to make sure that the XML is complete, but the XML as it represents the article, that the article is complete. And we do that with not necessarily all XML tools in PMC. But we try to make sure that the content that we have is complete.
Got another one at the top.
Okay, so there's the other one from Dartmouth about the concern is that we might get a great deal of buy-in from publishers, but if none of the hosts will support it, it won't have much effect. Very fair comment, and very possible. So they are on our hit list of people to get involved with this. Our aim is to simplify things, not so in a way it should be something that they'd like, because it would be minimizing the amount of variability in the XML between publishers. So I hope that they think it's a good thing. I don't know whether either of you three have got a comment on that.
Well, I said when we talked about this at JATSCon in April that whatever the group came up with as recommendations, we would be sure that it was ingestible into PMC. So I stand by that, and so far I'm very happy with everything that's come out of the group. I don't see anything that I don't see any recommendations that we've made so far, and we haven't made too many, but I don't see any that really should trip up any other aggregators or publishers, but you never know because people have their systems built in specific ways. So I would hope not, and I would hope that if there's a group of publishers willing to adopt some consensus in tagging, that the aggregators would be able to handle that content tag in that way. I'm a bit of an optimist today.
Okay. Okay, so there was the comment from Carl about Crossref encouraging publishers to public license URIs. I think that's a comment rather than a question, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's worth mentioning. And so, for instance, the main reason why we're taking the license information from JATS is when we started working on the bot, there was no other place to look for it. Now, more and more license information gets deposited in Crossref, so we can query that as well and even compare it to what is in JATS and maybe flag inconsistencies between what is in the JATS and in the Crossref database, and so help improve the workflows as we go.
Okay, we've got a question from Isaac about will these recommendations ever be referenced in the JATS tag library? And that's a good thing because I can see that we've got Tommy from Mulberry watching us. Oh, and Debbie, okay. And Debbie and Jeff, when we had our initial meeting, did agree that we would put those recommendations in that documentation as well.
Well, I don't know whether the specific recommendations, each of the specific recommendations are going to wind up there, but it certainly is going to be a resource that will be referenced in some way. And we should get something onto the JATS wiki if it's not there yet. I think Chris talked about that when we got together the other day.
Yeah.
Plus, not all the recommendations that we're concerned with might actually affect the JATS standard. They might just affect the JATS documentation or even the PMC tagging guidelines or something else. So not everything will end up in there.
Right, but we're always looking for good examples that will go into the JATS documentation because, as you've pointed out, Daniel, we put examples of everything in the JATS documentation.
I can't see any more questions coming in.
There was one from a guy called Lewis on the other section.
Oh.
He said, "What should anyone who wants to contribute?" Or right, okay, I've told him that.
Oh, okay.
Over the chat.
All right.
But if anyone's listening,
Yeah.
you can point them to the
You
links.
need to click on the Q&A button on the left-hand side of your screen on the toolbar to be able to ask a question.
Okay. Okay, and Chris has made a comment. Could do Tommy or Debbie want to say anything? Because I think you guys muted yourselves, didn't you? I think you can talk.
Everybody can talk and
Okay.
unmute themselves.
All right.
So.
Have you got anything to add?
We don't have a lot to add. I think it's a really good effort. I like the fact that the publishers are working to identify ways in which you folks can be more consistent. Our role, as near as I can tell in this, is to help get the word out once you make the decisions.
To that end, we will be trying to mine your stuff for samples to put into the tag library. So when you have something done, like the license stuff, we'll grab that and put it in as a license sample in the tag library.
And we're going to have to work with Jeff and the group to figure out how to identify those things, those practices that the JATS for reuse encourages. So we may, once you have some concrete recommendations, we may come back to you for clarification and documentation, but other than saying we think it's a fabulous idea and we'll help you document it, I don't know what else we have to say.
That's cool. Oh, yeah, so
Scroll down. Yeah. You know, all these recommendations that have been
okay.
in that library.
So sorry, thank you, Tommy. And just in case any of you guys missed the start of the presentations, I did mention Debbie, but Tommy and Debbie are part of Mulberry Technologies, who wrote the DTD. just in case anyone doesn't know. So where's the next? I can't see it.
So have you done this one?
Okay, have you sought a widely used set of tags for metadata search targets bots? Daniel, I think that's for you, isn't it? Oh, no.
I didn't hear that one. Can you please repeat?
It says,
Oh, okay, now I see it. I see it.
Okay.
Have you sought the widely used tags for metadata? I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Yes, we have certainly looked at all tags that could be used for our purposes. So, for instance, when we establish the categories in which the files go on Wikimedia Commons, we look at both the keyword and the subject tags and modify them for the purposes of upload to Wikimedia Commons. We also go to the mesh subject headings on PubMed and use those as additional ways of identifying or making the files that we upload identifiable to the people who look for the files and want to put something into a specific Wikipedia article. So I think we are spidering a number of different sources, and more would be nicer as long as they behave in a standard or in an expectable fashion, kind of. Ian wants to say something.
I know, I was just directing him at one question. The next up.
I just want to add to that, and just I'm not sure that I understand the question fully either. But if it's referring to the idea maybe of adding tags or anything, that's not something that we're doing. We're definitely maintaining compatibility with JATS. So we're not going to be adding any new XML elements or attributes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the question from Dartmouth Journals, which the question is, while I feel it is likely that JATS for reuse will, quotes, work in the sense that it still will be JATS compliant, each host has its own specific site behavior. These would need to be standardized across platforms to make reuse across hosts viable. So, yes, if you are encoding in a current state from a particular encoding of XML into however you present that XML in HTML, and the underlying XML changes, you will need to make changes in how you make that display layer available. However, how you make that transfer from your XML to your front-end display, that does not need to be standardized because there will be a variety and heterogeneity of front-end transforms. So we're not looking to make standardization at that level. We also think, and I would expect this to be the case, that there will be new journals coming online. There will be cases when publishers in the future will change vendors. There will be cases when journal back catalogs will be moved from one publisher to another. And all of these represent opportunities to improve the standard and quality of the XML. And where there are entities in the XML that currently have lots of diversity in how they're tagged, and where there's no best recommended practice, we hope our recommendations will offer a guiding light to people who want to make improvements in their XML. So it could take a while. Where we are right now is we're in a world where, for certain particular tags that are very important, like licensing, people have just been kind of making it up as they go along. And what we want to provide is best practice. And best practice, it doesn't mean overnight that we're going to fix the world, but what we hope will be in is a place where the world's slightly better and helps us iteratively get to a place where there are more standards and more compatibility across how we tag things. That's sort of how I would answer that. Yeah, and ultimately, if we get to that point where XML from publishers has higher consistency, it lowers costs across the whole industry. And so that's where you would see your if you want to talk to your CTO and say, look, I want to make this change to this tag, and your CTO says, what the hell, it already works on our platform. That's where you would make the argument to try and get the resources to do that. Speaking as kind of like the CTO for eLife, that's kind of what I'm saying to myself.
So you've got the next one to find it. the top
Okay.
in blue.
Oh, we've already answered that one.
Have you?
Yeah.
You've got a question on the chat as well that can't be, someone's in the wrong view, but Vincent wanted to ask, he says, what should anyone who wants to contribute or comment on recommendations do to get involved?
Oh, okay. So, well, I'll put the slides out publicly, but that's if I'll put our website. I've just shared the link to our website, and then from there you can find out the rest. But I'll also, actually, it's the point. I'll just paste everything into there from my final slide. Shows our Google Group mailing list, our GitHub repo, GitHub issues, our website, and our progress. So, because I think a fair few people, because of the confusion at the beginning, missed the first bunch of slides, but that had all of our links to how we're working. And I mean, the main thing that we're using is GitHub issues. So if you've got any particular area where you kind of want clarification or you'd like to propose it as something that we look into, that's where we'd like that to be covered, really. Okay, are there any other questions that we've missed? I think we've answered everything, haven't we, guys?
Yeah, maybe for this time.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, this once this ends, it will be posted on the eLife YouTube channel, and I'm sure we'll repost it somewhere else and kind of have links to it and everything. But thank you, everybody who's joined us, and we hope that we'll have a lot more interaction and involvement from the whole community going forward.
And there is still one more question about the mailing list.
Yeah, I put that in the chat. I'm not sure.
Maybe we should put it into the Q&A as well, and maybe in the metadata of the video once it's posted.
I'm not sure. I don't know how to add this in the chat. In the questions.
I don't think you can add to the Q&A. I think you just have to answer it verbally. So why don't you just say we'll put it underneath the video?
Right. Okay. So we'll add that information underneath the video. Could we put my whole slide deck? Yeah. So we'll put the slides up there as well underneath the video. Yeah.
Yeah. The JATS list is hosted at Mulberry. So mulberrytech.com. You should be able to find it in their mailing lists. Or search JATS-list on the Google machine.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you, everyone. I think we're shutting down now. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.